Welcome back to the In the Blues Tone podcast. My name's Shane. It's currently Friday, the 20th of March, 2020. Now, what a crazy year already, and it's getting crazier by the day. I'll touch on some of that in just a moment. But if you're new to the podcast, this is a guitar podcast on the most part, and it's not sponsored by anybody either. So if you do enjoy the podcast, please give it a thumbs up. We can get this video to 1,000 likes. I greatly appreciate it. Helps the channel to no end. If you'd just like to listen to the audio format only podcast, you can head over to inthebluespodcast.com. Click play there, no membership required or anything like that. It's totally free, and you can also find it on iTunes or any software like that. Just type in the blues or guitar podcast, it should come up. All right, so we're going to get into a few things, and I've been in a bit of a funk lately, and I'm going to tell you why. So you might have noticed I haven't been posting as many videos, but I've snapped out of that, and I feel like I'm a little bit back on track. So over the last 4 months, I've been planning a massive road trip to the States in May, coming back in late June. So 10th of May till about the 22nd of June. It was going to be just over 6 weeks. Epic road trip across the lower half of the United States. I had it all planned and paid for. Flights, car hire, insurance, all that kind of stuff. So everything was good to go. And now it's not good to go. So I was a little disheartened with that. I had sort of planned on bringing you an amazing amount of content from my trip away. Now, this was going to be stuff that was really relevant to guitar players and Guitar Search Saturdays and all that kind of stuff, but it's not going to happen this year, unfortunately. But you know what? There's bigger problems in the world than a trip getting cancelled, so I'm back on my positive train. I actually filmed this podcast yesterday, 2 days ago, and I was in a bit of a sort of shitty mood, I guess, so I figured I'd reshoot this now that I'm feeling like I'm a little bit back on track. So firstly, though, guys, I want to wish everyone safe health. This whole coronavirus thing is crazy. A lot of people sort of aren't taking it seriously. I know in the comments that a lot of people will say, you know, this is pretty crazy times, and other people might say it's getting blown way out of proportion. But, you know, I got a good friend of mine, Dr. Rick, who's usually on the podcast. It's the busiest time he's ever had. He's working every day, and it's absolutely crazy for what he does as a medical doctor. Now, I'm no expert when it comes to this stuff, and I don't claim to be, but what I can tell you is I'm going to try and follow the health guidelines the best that I can. I know a lot of people, especially in the US, have it way worse than Australia right now, and there's other countries in Europe that are like Italy that are just absolutely devastated by this. So it's getting worse and worse in a lot of the parts of the world, and I wish everybody the best. You know, it really hit me. It affected me sort of like on a, I want to say, emotional level to some extent. I was like disheartened by it. I think part of that for me was knowing that I couldn't go away, and I put so many months into planning this. And then I look at the news and I see people around the world, and I know I've got it pretty lucky where I am irrespective of this. So I'm not going to try to let, you know, whatever loss I incur financially from this trip sort of affect the way that I'm going to move forward. And I really wish everybody the best with this. I know it's a tough time. I know a lot of people are in lockdown already, and it got me thinking, especially after talking to Dr. Rick about this as well, that it's sort of up to the content creators to keep everybody busy and try to put out a bit of a positive attitude and try to, I guess, become a distraction in a way. And I really think that's important. So my goal is to snap out of my funk, which I feel like I have today. I feel so much better today, minus the financial thing, but it doesn't matter. So yeah, minus that, I really feel like I'm back on track, and I'm going to try my best to bring you guys some content to keep you busy if you are in lockdown or anything like that, or if you're just choosing to stay away from everybody else and stay in your homes. I know it's crazy times with everybody doing that sort of hoarding with the toilet paper and all that. I can't believe it. You know what? This is the simplest piece of logic I can say to everybody. If everybody just bought what they did every week, there'd be no like missing items in the aisles, and we'd all be fine, right? But it doesn't work like that. Everyone's just hoarding stuff they don't need. I'm sure there's folks out there have way more toilet paper than they could ever use, man. It's really crazy. I'm going to give you a little bit of a tip. I got on eBay here in Australia, and I bought some. Even though I'm not hoarding it, I didn't have much left at the house, and I should turn up early next week, all being well. So yeah, if you need some, get online and buy some. Don't fight the crowds down at the local supermarkets. It's just not worth your time. If you live overseas, try Amazon or something like that as well. Not sponsored by them, by the way. I guess what I wanted to do is apologize for really not posting up a whole lot of videos lately and not really touching on the subject either. I had this video shot where I was walking along the beach explaining a whole lot of stuff about this trip in detail. I also had another new series I was going to launch as well, but that'll have to wait till whenever it is I can get away next time. But yeah, I was in a bit of a funk, but I feel like now it's sort of, part of the distraction will be what I post on the channel. So you'll see more videos coming up, and I hope you like what I got in store. It's not what I had planned for, I guess, the rest of the year, but it is what it is. So if you enjoy what I do, I'll be posting videos on a more regular basis. So thanks for sticking with me. But my plan moving forward is to bring you some more content and hopefully create some sort of distraction for you. So let's get into it. Let's start with a little bit of guitar news in the world today. So one of the things that I'm used to sort of talking about or seeing come up on other channels is the fact that Gibson always end up suing other companies. But this time it's gone in the reverse. So Heritage, which are part of, I guess they bought out the old Gibson factory in Kalamazoo, Michigan back in the day, probably in the 80s. They owned basically that factory, but they had an agreement with Gibson that they weren't going to produce guitars that were, I guess, indistinguishable from actual Gibson guitars. But I'm going to read you a little bit from reverb.com. There's a little news article there. I'll also link this in the description below. It looks like Heritage are actually suing Gibson in a defensive move, maybe because of the uncertainty of how Gibson are when it comes to a lot of other guitar companies that might have a resemblance to some of their shapes and all that kind of stuff when it comes to the guitars. So I'll read this out to you, and if you want to read it for yourself, links will be below. Over the weekend, Heritage Guitars released a statement on its Instagram page announcing that it had filed a defensive lawsuit against fellow Michigan-born guitar brand Gibson. In response to, the statement reads, an ongoing and excessive campaign of harassment by the Gibson team since they came under new ownership. So they're pretty concerned that they're going to get hit with a lawsuit at some point due to the new management or new ownership. So yeah, I don't blame them. I mean, Gibson go after a lot of guitar companies, and maybe some of it's justifiable, but maybe a lot of it, and I think most people will agree, is a little bit crazy, especially if the guitar brand has been around forever. It just doesn't make any sense, and I think a lot of the times Gibson don't win these cases either. So yeah, it's interesting that Heritage filed a defensive lawsuit against them. So here we go. It says the relationship between these two brands is an interesting one. The Heritage guitars, having grown out of Gibson back in 1984 when Gibson decided to leave Kalamazoo, Michigan factory, a group of longtime Gibson guitar builders stayed behind and founded Heritage Guitars. So they were closing shop basically. These guys took over and made their own guitars. That's great. That's a great story. I like that. That's really cool. Initially, Gibson felt like the guitars Heritage produced were too similar to those that Gibson had made in its name building. The two brands came to an amicable confidential agreement in 1991 and have been, according to Heritage's statement, enjoying a peaceful coexistence for nearly 29 years. It seems though the tides have turned. Heritage blames Gibson for new management, while Gibson blames the new releases by Heritage and the spiritual sibling brands that are embroiled in battle once more. So it looks like this agreement, I guess that you're looking at this from two ways. Gibson's perspective is the guitars are way too close now to some of theirs, and I guess Heritage is saying, no, we have an agreement and these aren't quite. It's the same old story, man. Gibson going after what they think is theirs. We were surprised when threats and claims that were inconsistent with our original agreement started coming in from Gibson's new management team, Heritage wrote. We responded promptly and amicably despite their aggressive threats to outspend us legally if we didn't comply. Wow. Hang on, how many millions of dollars in debt is Gibson? And they're threatening to outspend them legally. That's crazy. Yesterday's action was about us standing up and showing we're not going to be bullied by companies that lack the integrity to stand by their word. Yesterday, Gibson issued a formal statement of its own in response to both the lawsuit and Heritage's statement. The brand defended its position on the matter, writing that its legal team reached out without suing Heritage, and only after Heritage launched some of the new guitars that clearly did not respect nor adhere to the original contract. And lastly, Gibson reiterated that it was its intention to come to a constructive resolution, and it's basically saying that it feels like Heritage have rewritten the Gibson legacy or history to some extent there as well. So there you have it. Let us know what you think about this lawsuit here. I'll leave links to it in the description below and you can check it out for yourself. Now, I don't really know how this is going to play out, but if there are any updates on it, I'll no doubt update you on a future podcast. But yeah, interesting times for Heritage and I guess for Gibson as well. We'll see what happens with this coming up. So about a month ago, as of shooting this video, I did a video called The Great Guitar Purge of 2020, where I said I was going to sell off a whole lot of my guitars, which I absolutely did. I managed to move quite a few before that actual video even went up. And then through Instagram and a few other means, I managed to sell off a lot of them locally. So it was great decluttering. I can't recommend that enough. If you've got a lot of anything sitting around that you're not using and you can either give it away or sell it cheap or move it away and just get rid of it, it's a great feeling. It is for me at least anyway. I don't like having guitars all over the place and then not using them and then having to get more gig bags, having to get more strings. It becomes more expensive over time. Now my collection is pretty much down to the stuff that I know I could just grab and take to a gig and I'd be good to go. I did have a change of heart on a couple of guitars, but I have managed to sell a few. So I sold the Tokai 145L, which was that ES335. That's gone. It's gone to a really great home. The guy loves it, and yeah, it suited him as well, which was really cool. That was a beautiful guitar made in Japan, just not something that I'll be using anytime soon, so I'm glad it's gone. I also sold my Fender Stratocaster, which it was that white one made in Mexico. I'm going to try and leave the door open for a potential Strat down the line, a long-term one. Part of this trip overseas was going to be trying to find one of those really great Strats in a lefty somewhere, but yeah, I'll have to look locally now, which isn't a big deal either, but when the time comes, I'm going to buy a Strat that I can see myself having for 10 years, much like my original Series 50s Tele, which I recently purchased. That is just a beautiful guitar. I love the 50s version of that in the Strat. I've been still looking for one. Hopefully one shows up pretty soon. Now, I sold most of the Harley Benton guitars except for one. Actually, I got two left. So the one that I kept was the DC Junior, the double cut with the single P90. I love that thing, and that can be used on videos of stuff that's less expensive, whether it's, amps or pedals or whatever. I can use that on those. And I also kept the one that had a bit of damage, the one that had the cracks in the back of the finish, and also the wonky tuner, which was their Les Paul style guitar. I kept that as well. So those two will be like the guitars I can use for like less expensive stuff, but I got rid of all the other ones, all the Teles, everything. The PRS style, CST24, that's gone. And just being able to clear out all of these guitars has been a really good thing for me. I'm wrapped. And that's not to say that Harley Benton guitars aren't any good. I think they're some of the best, if not the best, inexpensive guitars I've ever played. Some of the artist guitars would be in that conversation as well, but definitely in terms of what I've had shipped to the house, and they've got that sort of 50s vibe to them, the big fat necks, things like that I really like that most inexpensive brands don't have. So they're really great guitars, but the problem with me is if I'm going to go to a gig, I'm going to take my Fender because I've invested in it. I've had it for a long time. Well, one of them at least anyway. And I don't need two other inexpensive Teles there. I mean, it's been great to have them shipped to the house, and I'm fortunate in that regard as well. But yeah, I didn't really feel the need to hold on to all of this stuff long term. So they've all gone. I've pretty much sold them all. I sold a couple of the Dan Electros. I did have a change of heart on the Dan Electro 84 Strat with the 3 lipstick pickups. So that Stratocaster type guitar is, I thought I'll hold on to that. It's good. It's got a really unique tone to it. It also has a really great tremolo system, so I'm going to hold on to that, at least until I find the Strat of my dreams, if that ever happens. I feel a little bit jinxed when it comes to Strats. I think my best one in recent times was the one I just sold, was that white one, which was made in Mexico. That was a really great standard Strat from a few years back. Really cool guitar, sounded great. I'm going to try and find a 50s Player Series down the line, all being well. So that's the update. My cupboard now closes. I can get all of my guitars in one location and close the doors instead of having stuff piled in the other room and boxes and needing more sets of strings and needing to get more gig bags. I have to worry about that now. I've just got the stuff that, with the exception of a few guitars that I'm going to keep long term, there's a couple that I still haven't sold. One of the last guitars I'm going to sell before the purge is complete is the Dan Electro 59 NOS, that high sparkle one with the 2 lipstick pickups. Now that sounds pretty good, and for the right player, it's a great guitar. You can play some slide on it. If you're a rhythm player and you just want some nice open chord sort of things, if you play this with basic chords and not a whole lot of lead stuff, it'll be fine for that as well. But for what I like to do on a guitar, it just doesn't tick any of the boxes that I like. The playability is really limited. You kind of bang into the back of the neck really early on up the neck, and it just doesn't feel very good to play. So I'm going to be selling that, and for the right person, that'll be a great guitar. But for me, I don't like it. I don't like the controls on it either, having them stacked, so the volume and tone control are both stacked on top of each other. In the heat of the moment when you play live, trying to find the right control is a nightmare. Just a horrible design, and I know that's how they made them back in the day, but that doesn't mean that they're good. I don't think everything that was old is good. Yeah, look at computers. So yeah, it's an upgrade that they should maybe consider doing something a little bit different when it comes to the controls. Having them stacked like that is just an absolute nightmare for someone who wants to play live. You know, if you're playing here at home and you're just jamming out, which I'm sure a lot of people are doing right now, it doesn't make any difference. But for me personally, it's not a guitar that's high on my list of ever wanting to take it out and play. So it's definitely going to go. But overall, I'm really wrapped. I was able to move so much of this stuff. And you know what? It's kind of inadvertently weird and kind of cool. The money I made from selling guitars will pretty much cover the loss I've taken on this whole trip, because insurance won't cover any of that. But that's another story. But yeah, it's great to be able to get rid of all the stuff I wasn't using and to have it go to a great home as well. And it was nice meeting everybody as well that actually purchased the guitar. I'd usually head down the shops here or wherever and meet people and hand it off, and they're like, oh, I recognize you. So yeah, I hope everyone who bought a guitar off me or whatever is enjoying it. So thank you again for supporting the channel. I appreciate that. And yeah, rock on. So Fender is set to release one of their new Mustang amplifiers, the Fender Mustang GTX. I hope the X doesn't stand for I don't like it or failed or something like that. So yeah, we'll see how they go with these amps. I was a little bit out of the loop. I didn't really watch any of the NAMM coverage. I'm not really that overly interested in it, but this sort of caught my eye and ear when I heard about this at my local music shop. So yeah, I'll get my hands on one, not from Fender, but I'll be able to borrow one from a shop here locally when they do come in. So I'll give you a full review, both pros and cons of that. If you know the history of the channel, I was a big advocate of the old Fender Mustangs, the version 2s. I had both the Mustang 3 and the 4, and they were both amazing amps. I also reviewed all of them in that range at one point or another. But yeah, they were really great. And then over to the GTs, which I bought the day that it was released, and I was highly disappointed. So I really think, and I hope Fender have listened to the criticisms of the GT amplifiers. Now, there'll be people out there that love them for playing at home, and that's fine. Some of the things I really loved about the old Fender Mustang amps were some of the presets I made for it, which were some of the most downloaded in the world, were basically indistinguishable from the actual reference amplifier when you have them in the room. I remember doing blind tests with Rick and my other friend Brian. We couldn't tell which amp was which, so they nailed it. They got it right. It had that big 3D projection, which is something that the GT amplifiers just lacked. You know, there's something to be said about just not making things lighter for the sake of it at the expense of tone. I would like to hope that these new amps are maybe slightly heavier if that has any contribution to the tone. You know, like, don't think too much about just making it light and compact. Make it sound good. And, you know, Fender hit it out of the park when it came to the Fender Tone Master series amps. The Deluxe Reverb and the Twin are unreal, and that Twin is one of my favorite amps right now. It's just so light and loud, and it's got the 3D attack and all that kind of thing that the GTs just don't have. They don't even sound comparable. Now, they are at very different price points, but my argument for that is the old Mustang amps had just as much 3D projection as the Tone Master series. So yeah, they got it right. They made a mistake. The Tone Masters are amazing. I'd love to see whether or not they nail that 3D projection when it comes to these new amps. Now, I've seen a couple of guys play these on videos now on YouTube. I looked into it a little bit, and I'm not convinced just yet that they sound great. Now, I watched a NAMM video with the guy Shane from Fender, and yeah, he was playing one. The clean tone sounded a little bit on the nasty side. So we're going to see whether or not they get this right. But the good news is, anytime I can get my hands on one of these, I'll definitely do a full review. I'll use it for a while too. I'll use it for a few days, just exclusively, and dive in and learn all about it and try to make, you know, the best of it out of any situation I can with the amplifier. So I don't go out to bash modeling amps. I was a huge fan of the old ones, and then I was really felt a bit let down with the GT series, although I'm sure they're fine for just home users. But I like an amp I can still take out and play it live, even if it is a digital amp. They're just compact and easy. You know, my friend, one of my best friends, still has one of the Mustang 3 version 2. It is so good in the room. It always sounds great. He hasn't done anything to he hasn't changed the speaker like I did on mine or anything like that. So yeah, they're just a big sounding digital modeling amp. They got it right, and it is a bit heavier than the newer amps, but you know, weight aside, man, it comes down to tone, and I would take a heavier amp that sounds great. oh, it's not even that heavy anyway when you compare it to like a tube amp, over something that's just light and has less of that sort of 3D projection. So as soon as I get my hands on one of the Fender Mustangs, expect a video, and I'll keep you posted on that. Hopefully they're not too far away. Nearly every live stream I do, I get asked about solid-state amplifiers and my thoughts about this one over that one. So I thought what I'd do today is give you my top 3 solid-state amps of all time. So we're going 100% analog, no digital effects whatsoever. So if you love the Katana or the Fender Mustang, that's awesome. But this will just be straight up solid-state amplifiers or transistor amps with no digital trickery going on the inside. Not that digital stuff's bad, but this is like my all-time favorite analog solid-state amplifiers. So we're going to get into this, starting with number 3 on this list, which has to be the Tech 21 Trademark 60. Now, I had the 212 version of this. They also had a single 12 version as well. You can't find these new anymore. They're made in New York City. They're 100% analog. You can get anything from a clean tone to that off clean tone, you know, that sort of Stevie Ray little wing tone, all the way through to ZZ Top, all the way through to like Carlos Santana and more. You could get everything out of these amps. My only one small criticism about it, I kind of wish I had held on to it a bit longer, but back then we were playing brutally loud, and I think I traded up to a twin back then, but yeah, it was not loud enough for a lot of the rooms I was playing in, which was crazy. We did a New Year's Eve gig on the back of a truck, and it was a whole lot of fun, but my amp definitely wasn't loud enough in that type of situation. We weren't mic'd up either. Had I been mic'd up, it would have been fine. But yeah, it was one of those amps where the tones were amazing, and if you're recording at home, just get anything you want out of them with no pedals, but they just didn't sound that loud. And I kind of feel like sometimes in solid-state amplifiers of any description, the speaker's what lets them down the most. And back then, I wasn't really replacing speakers much, or if at all, so I didn't really think to change the speakers. Had I have done it all over again, I would have kept that amp and changed out the speakers to some that are more efficient. You know, the Celestion 7080s, not the best speakers in the world. They can suit some amplifiers extremely well, like the Artist Tweed Tone amp, but in that amp, it needed a little bit more throw and a little bit more oomph, and I would have replaced them with like Eminent Swamp Things or something like that. It would have just peeled the paint off the walls. It would have been awesome. So number 3, I'm going to give to that. Now, when it comes to my first and second one, it's sort of like they're about even. And you might already know the PV Bandit's definitely going to be included in this list. I've spoken about that extensively. I think they're all really good, but my favorite one, hands down, is the Red Stripe one, either made in China or made in the US. It doesn't really matter which one you get. They're both great. There's a couple of different sort of slight variations visually on those, but they're all good. I've owned 3 of those over the years. I don't currently have one, but odds are I'll get one at some point again because I'm an idiot. And you can never go wrong with a PV Bandit. Every time I hear one in the live mix, I'm like, man, that's so loud. That's one of the great things about the PV Bandit. Not only does it take pedals well, the clean channel's brutally loud. It has great 3D projection, and it'll cut through the mix like any great amplifier out there. You know, you get a whole lot of different drive channels you can choose from, the vintage, the modern, the high gain, all that kind of stuff. You know, back when they had the actual spring reverbs in instead of the digital ones, yeah, it was just a great sounding, great feeling amp to play. It just felt great, it sounded great, and it cut through the mix, no problems at all. Now, the other one that's sort of like equal first is one that I've never owned, but I played with one when I was in San Francisco. I also did a video about it. I'll leave a link up in the cards. It's the Fender Deluxe Plus 112. Now, this particular amplifier is brutally loud like the PV Bandit. It has that Fender clean tone. If you love Fender amps, then go for the actual Fender over the PV. But the drive channel on the Fender one isn't quite as good. It does have a voicing control that you can sort of scoop and add more mids, but I never found like I was using that when I played it live. I just used my pedal. I think I had the Royal Flush with me on that trip, and I just plugged it into the clean channel, and man, it sounded just as great as any of my other amps. And my friend Ed, if you're watching this, Ed, hope you're well, man. Hope you're keeping safe. He basically paid like $70 or something like that in San Francisco for it. They're dirt cheap. I don't see them anywhere in Australia, and the ones I have seen online were pretty much ruined. Like they're really highly damaged, and they're getting old, right? So I really feel like these are some of the best solid-state amps of all time. So it really comes down to what you like more. You know, a smaller, compact sort of amplifier being the Fender with that Fender clean tone, or a slightly larger cabinet with maybe more tonal variations within it being the PV Bandit. So given your choice on the day, if someone said, hey, you got to play through the PV Bandit, I'd be like, yes. And if someone said, you got to play through the Deluxe Plus, I'd be like, no problems, let's do it. So yeah, I'd have no problems getting my tone out of either. Both are really good. I'd say they're both slightly better than the Tech 21 just in terms of their overall 3D projection and volume, which is why I'm giving them the nod over the Tech 21. Tech 21 is probably one of the most versatile amps on the list and maybe one of the nicest sounding, but it just doesn't cut it in the live mix quite as well as these other two amplifiers, which you can find dirt cheap. So if you can find one, definitely give them a look. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. My name's Shane. If you do want to check out the audio-only version, you can head over to inthebluespodcast.com and click play there. No memberships or anything required. Or you can find it on iTunes or whatever software you use to actually get that going. So one of the things I should point out too, I'm going to try and do a live stream either Wednesday or Thursday mornings coming up my time, which will make it the prior night if you live over in the US where the majority of the audience is. And I'm going to try and make more videos while all of this is going on to keep people distracted and hopefully put a bit of positive vibes out there. I know not everybody has it great right now. I know people are probably already sick that may be watching this or they're recovering from it if they did catch something, if they did get the coronavirus. So yeah, you've just got to be cautious and, I wish everybody well. Sorry I went off the map there for a little while. The last video that I posted just a few days ago, I'd shot over about 2 weeks ago. So yeah, it's time to get back into it. Time to keep moving forward. I wish you all well. And hopefully I'll have Dr. Rick coming up on the channel again soon for a podcast. And if you have any questions about that, when that happens, we'll pick his brain because I really think it's probably a good time to listen to guys that are in the know about this because lots of crazy stuff happening out there. Just be courteous to each other and we'll catch you soon. See ya.